Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and what a weekend we Wildcats had. I mean, seriously, and we'll talk about this. It does not get much better. If you were hiding under a rock and don't know what happened in the last week, but are still listening to this podcast, well, thank you. Arizona beat Duke by 5 on the road. Stunning. The Wildcats are now ranked number 3 in the AP men's basketball poll. And oh, by the way, the football team defeated Colorado. Close. Last play of the game. Won on a field goal. Who cares? A win is a win. Arizona is in the top 20, Shane. Can you believe it?
Yeah, well, and on the one hand, the longtime Wildcat fan of me has some PTSD, so it's like, very cautious, like, oh crap, something bad's gonna happen now. But like I said last week, just enjoying the ride for as long as I can. I actually had tweets ready to go for when I thought Arizona was going to lose to Duke, when Duke took the late lead, and when Arizona was losing to Colorado in the fourth quarter.
God,
and I was like,
so
it's not that bad. Well, I was just thinking, well, it's not. I mean, Arizona, they played a tough game against Duke and they lost a close game winner. And then against Colorado, they were bound to slip up eventually. And they came back and they won both. Arizona was behind and the basketball team was behind in the final minute, came back and won. The football team was behind almost the entire game, didn't lead until the clock hit 0-0. So it's amazing 24 hours. And what's already been a very fun last few weeks, our viewership and listenership has reflected that. And we appreciate everyone who's hopped aboard for as long as this keeps going. And we hope you'll continue to roll with us even when this incredible run ends. But it's been fun. And like I said, one day at a time, 1 week at a time, choosing to enjoy it for as long as it lasts, because it could end at any time.
Last week on the show, we had the voice of the Wildcats, Brian Jeffries, join us. Now, this week, we bring it back our old friend, the voice of Arizona Stadium and McHale Center, Jeff Dean, to break down everything men's basketball and football. What a ride. But he
must be having a ton of fun right now. I mean, he had to call so many crappy Arizona football games, especially over the years, and now he's getting to call one after another. Happy for him.
You bet. You bet. All right, let's get right into it, Shane. We have a lot to talk about on this show. Let's get into our segment 1A, Shane's standouts. Where do you even go with this one?
Well, how about one standout for every program that won a game or a match in the last week? Because we had so much success, even beyond football and men's hoops. We'll start with the volleyball team. They've had a rough year, to say the least. But they had a home sweep of Utah and Colorado last week. And I want to mention Sofia Maldonado Diaz. She had a career-high 27 kills against Colorado. Very nice performance for the senior from Mexico in what's been a tough year, transition year really for the volleyball team. Women's basketball team won a pair of home games. They beat NAU. They beat Loyola Marymount. Brea Cunningham, who we mentioned last week, had 26 combined points in those games. She was 12 of 13 from the field in those games. She actually leads the conference in field goal percentage, which is not easy in a very loaded Pac-12 on the women's side. And Adia Barnes' team is 3-0, so that's good to see. Men's hoops. Kylan Boswell was named Pac-12 Player of the Week, deservedly so. I want to mention Keishad Johnson, who I could argue is the most impactful addition to this year's team in terms of the defense and toughness he brings. He made some big baskets down the stretch against Duke, including that three-point play to give Arizona the lead for good with less than a minute left. Had a team high 14 points and tied a team high with 8 rebounds. Had another very good game against Southern. Only turned the ball over once against Duke as well. Turnovers have been a problem for Arizona, but just the one turnover for Keishad Johnson in that game. And then for football, a lot of guys you could shout out, including Special Teams Player of the Week, Tyler Loop, who had chip shot or not, it's tough to make those last second kicks. And he made a 52-yarder earlier in the game. That was a big deal too. I'm going to go with Jonah Coleman. He's right up there with T-Mac in terms of the biggest impact of the 2022 recruiting class. He had 4 runs of over 20 yards against Colorado, including a 54-yarder and a 49-yarder. He had that 24-yard run on Arizona's last drive to set up the game-winning field goal. He outrushed Colorado on his own 179-77. So massive game for him, and it goes without saying Arizona would not have won that game without his performance.
Well, I think you made the right call with, all 4 of them, but especially the last 2. I was really curious where you would go with men's basketball. I mean, this team, look at what they did against. Now we're recording this on Tuesday night. Look at what they did against Southern. They had kind of a slow start in the first half and dropped 60+ points in the second half. Just a machine. This team is the
most predictable thing in the world is that they're going to have a rough start against Southern. I mean, it's like if there's any hangover to be had in college basketball, it's the after winning at Duke hangover. But even with that, They had 18 points with 8 minutes left in the first half, and they end up with 97. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Is right. All right, let's get right into it. If you are new to the show, then I'm not sure you are familiar with our sponsor, which is Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com and use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get one of those beauties if you are watching the video that Shane is holding in his hand. Or you can go to fanatics.com and get yours. But you can use promo code Wildcat Country, get $5 off at iceshaker.com. All right, Shane, let's start it off. Number one in buy or sell. I mean, some of these are buy and sell, some of them are not, but I guess, how does this past week rank with the best Arizona fall weekends in recent memory? So a couple to refresh your memory. Last year's Maui title and the ASU victory, that was pretty cool. And then 2012, the Florida victory on the same day as the comeback win in the New Mexico Bowl. Where does this one stack up?
Well, I will. Well, first of all, it's not a buy or sell question, but I'll work with it anyway. I would say as far as like the most fun single day, you have to go back to 2012 because not only were there two big wins. I mean, the New Mexico Bowl, you think who cares? But if you watch the game, I mean, I'll admit I turned it off. I thought it was over.
My gosh,
they were down 14 with a minute left, less than a minute left, and came back and won. And then later that night, I was at McHale for that game against Florida. Which our guest from a couple of weeks ago, Miles Simon, was on commentary for. And they were down 6 with less than a minute left and came back and won that game. And it was just an incredible couple games. In fact, the football team actually made its way back to Tucson, and Rich Rod spoke at halftime with Matt Scott, the MVP of that game. So it was just a fun day of Arizona sports. If you want to compare just this year and last year, the Maui title and the win over ASU versus, I would say in terms of the significance for both programs, I think this year was even bigger. And you have to be careful with recency's bias, but it doesn't get any bigger than winning at Duke in terms of a regular season game. There is, maybe Kentucky or Kansas, and that's it. Okay. And then winning at Colorado for the matches Arizona's longest football winning streak in 25 years. It's kind of sad that 4 matches it, but it does. Our friend Blair Willis noted that this is only the 5th time in the last 25 years that Arizona will finish their conference schedule with a winning record in a conference. So I think that means a lot with both teams in the top 25, and the football team especially. I mean, the basketball team's always in there. The football team, going from hunter to hunted, surviving a very tough game on the road. I know Colorado's struggled recently, but they're still a decent team, and they're in Boulder. And so I don't think there would have been any shame in losing a close game, but they found a way to grind out a win without playing their best collectively. So I think in terms of what it could mean for both programs, I would say that this year was bigger than last year, even though I know how big, obviously the ASU game is, and we got another one of those coming up again next week.
I was on Friday night. I ended up watching the game at the new DraftKings Sportsbook in Scottsdale, and actually watched it nearby. A listener of this program, I want to give him a shout out because I was able to hang out with him a couple times. His name is Eric as well. Great guy, knowledgeable fan, and he and I believe his brother listen to the program. So Shane, there are a couple
appreciate
people
that
actually tune in. What can I say? No, it was really cool, and just to be able to watch it, to get a U of A chant broken out there. I guess just for me, I'm going to say the recency bias is real. The way both wins happen. The ASU game last year, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this program, was so
excruciating.
Like it was like a relief at the end of the game.
Yes.
I didn't feel that way with either of these wins. It was like, I'm not sure I was expecting either to end up as victories, and for Arizona to do that the way that they did on Friday night, and then on Saturday to come back when they just really didn't play that well and get that victory. This is definitely up there. I don't know if it tops the New Mexico Bowl and the Florida win, because that was just a really cool single day.
Yeah.
But in 24 hours, that was pretty darn cool. So I'll put this one right up there. All right, number 2, let's get right to it. Arizona men's basketball looks like it has the clutch gene that it has been missing in recent years. By yourself.
I'll buy. I don't know if I would say necessarily the clutch gene, but just like I guess maybe that's just the different way of saying like a good way to finish games. But I mean, Arizona won plenty of games in the regular season the last 2 years too. I think what's more impressive is you have, it's a more well-rounded team, and you have guys who are maybe a little less timid around the basket. So from that perspective, I guess I would agree with you. Keshad Johnson is fantastic on both sides of the ball in the paint. They have guys who aren't afraid to shoot for better or worse. I know we're going to talk about that a little more in a little bit. But they have, like you said, those alphas, those guys who want the ball late in games. I think, and Arizona has guys who whether it's Kylan Boswell or Caleb Love, either of those guys would probably be the most likely candidates to take a big last second shot this season. But last year, who would you go to? Tubelis was their best player, but was he the go-to guy late? Probably not. Umar Ballo, probably not. Maybe Kirk Kriisa, but that guy is a little crazy, and he'd take a 40-footer covered by two guys. So I think that it's a combination of aggressiveness and confidence that maybe that they have this year compared to last year. They're a more well-rounded team. They're a deeper team. And I thought we saw that against Duke.
So I'm going to say that, yes, this team, I'm going to buy the heck out of this one. Keyshawn Johnson, Caleb Love, and Kylan Boswell. I mean, this is the clutch gene that Arizona had been missing. Nobody in that game against Princeton wanted to take a shot at the end of the game. They didn't.
Yeah, that's the biggest
Everybody
difference.
was afraid.
No one's afraid to take a last-second shot on this team. Because some of those guys have been there and done that, like Love and Johnson have.
That team last year, I mean, and Pelle Larsson obviously had, he was part of it, but he looks even more confident this year.
Yeah.
To watch Arizona's free throw shooting at the end of the game, to watch them not be afraid on offense. They were scared against Princeton. They weren't on Friday night against Duke.
Play not to lose against Princeton. Yeah.
They did. Yeah. That team last year would have lost that Duke game by double digits.
Maybe.
This is a different team. Now, Caleb Love has not been that great, but his free throw shooting at the end of that game, Pelle Larsson's free throw shooting at the end of that game, they withstood the noise and buried him. And that is the clutch gene. You will not find 5 better wins in college basketball this year than Arizona just got on Friday night.
Yeah, and I was encouraged that, we talk about the football team, not playing their best and finding a way to win. Well, Caleb Love, he hit those free throws late, which were huge, obviously. But he didn't have a very good game. He was 3 of 10 from the field. He was 1 of 5 from 3, and the only 3 he made was the one he banked in before halftime. He turned the ball over 6 times, and Arizona still won at Duke. So that tells you how good this team is, and imagine when they're firing on all cylinders. It's only been 3 games in the season, but we've seen enough to know that this team is fantastic and probably will only keep getting better. And it's just a matter of, like what Tommy Lloyd said after the game, he's less worried about what happens in November than what happens in March or April. But this team continues to stay healthy and get better and play together as a single unit, and they are more primed for an NCAA tournament run than certainly last year's team or even the year before that.
All right, Shane, I'm going to let number 3. I'm just going to let you go ahead, gloat. Arizona's non-conference schedule in basketball. I panned it for months. I said it was too hard. I said it was ridiculous. Boy, how stupid do I look right now?
Well, it was 1 game, to be fair to you. I mean, I will.
I didn't give him a chance in that game.
If we're doing it in the form of a buy or sell, like do a buy or sell their non-conference schedule, I bought it from the beginning. I'll obviously buy it now, and I would have bought it if they had lost it by 20 at Duke, because I still feel the same way. I wouldn't feel any differently now that playing these games is only going to make you better and tougher and learn more about yourselves throughout the season. So I think it's a great thing that they're putting themselves in this position to play some of the best teams. They may slip up along the way. Again, it's only 1 game. We talked about if they would go 3-3 or 4-2 in those big non-conference games, that would be a success. You can't just assume they're going to go 6-0 now because they beat Duke. They may have a slip up here or there, and that's okay. But I still feel the same way, that there's only good things can come, barring injury, obviously, only good things can come out of playing these games. And you always risk injury regardless of where you play. And you're not going to be punished for losing the games, but the reward you can reap, not only in net rankings, but in terms of experience going into the tournament, is massive.
All right. So I'll say it this way, Shane. Are you buy or selling? Will you buy or sell 4-2 or better in the 6 big non-conference games?
Would that be my prediction as of now?
Would you buy 4-2, 5-1, or 6-0, or would you sell it, meaning that Arizona will be 3-3 or worse in those games?
Well, based on the win at Duke, I would say that they probably will find a way to win 3 of those next 5. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. I would think it's an easy buy. I was going to say 5-1, but I didn't want to make that would have been hard. I think Michigan State. I know they lost James Madison. They're probably going to lose to Duke as we're doing the show now. They're still very tough. I think Arizona should be a big favorite over Wisconsin, who does not look to be all that great this year. That game's at home. I think
we owe Wisconsin some payback anyway.
Yeah, well, that's true. I think at Purdue is going to be real tough. They're still a top 5 team. I think Alabama should be a win. That game is in Phoenix, and then FAU is a tough team. We'll see what Arizona's made of in Vegas. Maybe we have the doubleheader Vegas Bowl and Arizona FAU.
We did that in 08, right? With BYU and UNLV.
That was phenomenal. I was at both of them. They lost the basketball game, but the football game was all that I cared about that night. So we'd love to see a Wildcat sweep in Vegas. We'll see how that plays out. All right, number 4. Let's get on to. I got still a little kind of crossover here. I'm watching the game on Friday night, and it came to me, Shane. Caleb Love is the Jayden de Laura of basketball. Thoughts? Would you buy or sell that analogy?
Well, would you elaborate a bit, please? I think I know where you're going, but tell me what you're thinking.
I think I would say risk-reward player, reckless, can be phenomenal, can be disastrous, but is exciting to watch one way or the other. Buy or sell?
Doesn't lack in confidence. Certainly, I'll buy that. I mean, I feel like the more accurate comparison is maybe Kirk Kriisa in terms of guys who
loves better than Kirk Kriisa.
I agree with that. I'm saying in terms of guys who like you love one play and you hate the next. Like Jayden de Laura will make a great 30-yard pass out of the pocket or run for 30 yards, and then the very next play he'd chuck it into triple coverage. Kirk Kriisa would do the same thing on the basketball side. Caleb Love, I don't think is quite that reckless. He's not as accurate a shooter. It's kind of a trade-off. Do you want guys who are, a little more timid and weren't willing to take over a game like we had on last year's team? Or would you rather have a guy like Caleb Love who's going to miss his share of shots, but isn't afraid to take the big shots? And so I think Arizona's talented enough to overcome those deficiencies for most of the game, as long as Caleb Love shows up late, which is, I think, one of the big reasons that they brought him on. So I see where you're going. I don't think it's quite not as accurate a comparison, but there are some similarities. Whenever I thought the Jayden de Laura of basketball, I thought of Kirk Kriisa, or when I thought the Kirk Kriisa of football, I thought of Jayden de Laura.
Okay, fair enough. We're going to break down more of the football game with Jeff Dean. So let's talk about a few big issues that are going around the Arizona circles this week. Jedd Fisch. So rumor is that, Texas A&M obviously fired Jimbo Fisher. Michigan State has an opening, and UCLA very likely to have an opening as per the rumors. Jedd Fisch was a former assistant at UCLA. Are you personally concerned that Jedd would leave for any of these jobs?
I will sell that he would leave for any of those, or that he would just leave this quickly. Let's do a little list here on why I think Jedd Fisch would stay and why he wouldn't, just to kind of give an overview. Reasons for leaving, the obvious: more money, potentially a bigger name program. And I know he's been frustrated at times with the fan support or lack thereof in Tucson. So all those elements are obvious, and the money usually being the biggest one. And that's not a put down; it's just how it is. Why would he stay? For one, I think he and his family have actually been looking for a place to call home for more than just a couple of years. It's the life of an assistant coach is nomadic, and I think he's gotten kind of tired of it. He had a daughter who was attending U of A. She may have graduated by now. I'm not sure, but I know he has another who's 13, 14 years old. Do they want to move? Does he want to move his family again anytime soon? Money's always an issue, but I think that's important too. And in terms of being able to win at Arizona, consider that there's no reason at this point in time to think that Arizona can't compete for the Big 12 championship next year. In fact, I'd say the team I'm most concerned about going into next season is the team they play Saturday. So the Big 12 may be more attractive in terms of being competitive indefinitely, especially with Texas and OU leaving for the SEC and not having to deal with USC, Oregon, and Washington every year. So this is kind of a chance to rebrand Arizona football as a major player. You got in a new conference and a chance to make a statement right away and get more national attention that way. And I think that's something that could appeal to Jedd Fisch. And then despite what Dr. Robbins said about budget issues, I know he's a sports fan, and you remember what he said years ago about Sean Miller before the whole Brooke Richardson situation, when there were rumors that Ohio State was going to try to lure Sean Miller from Tucson. He said they could have him over his dead body. So I think he and Dave Hickey will do everything they can to raise money from boosters and keep Jedd Fisch happy in Tucson as much as that's possible. And reportedly, they're already working on it. We talked about a few weeks ago whether another extension is necessary. Maybe it is at this point, because Jedd definitely has some leverage. So I think the reasons to stay, at least for this year, outweigh the reasons why he would go. But it's always a fluid situation. And if he stays this year, next year could be a different story.
I heard from a source who is a good source, not my main source that I normally get from, but another source reached out and said, don't kid yourself. Jedd Fisch will get a contract extension at Arizona for thereabouts of $5 million. a year.
What's he making now?
I think it's like
three something.
So he's going to get, actually, I think it's less than that actually. Yeah. So I think that he'll get a nice raise. And, right now I think he is, what was it? He's getting 16.3 over 5 years. So it's a little over 3. So he's going to get a pretty sizable extension. I'm not concerned about that. With that said, none of those jobs, I don't think if you're Jedd, if you're going to leave, you're going to leave for a job that's a no doubter. I'm sure he would leave for Florida, which is his alma mater.
Yep.
I think there's a pretty good chance, considering their schedule next year, that Billy Napier will not make it through the 2024 season. So I think that is a strong one. Yeah. I think so. I would take a look at that. I also wouldn't rule out after next year maybe an NFL job for Jedd Fisch. If he wants to go, he's coached in the NFL, he gets it.
Yeah.
So after he's losing his guys, he gets another year with Fafita and McMillan. They're going to the Big 12, which is weaker. Outside of Utah, Kansas State, and probably Colorado offhand. I'm not sure there are any world beaters there.
Yeah.
That really would scare me off. I mean, TCU obviously made the championship game last year. Central Florida is not bad. I think Oklahoma State will obviously have, some legs. We'll see how it all shakes out. But I think Arizona should be a top 4 team in that conference. Mm-hmm. And Kansas State, regardless if they lose that game early on, it doesn't count as a conference game.
Right.
So it does not affect the standing to get into the Big 12 championship.
And they have 5 home games in the conference next year.
Correct. We'll see what happens. With that said, I would be very surprised if Jedd Fisch left this year, and I'm not worried about UCLA. I think Jonathan Smith from Oregon State seems like a logical candidate. He's from Pasadena. Oregon State does not have a conference, nor do they know who they're playing next year.
Right.
I think it would make sense for him, even though he's an Oregon State alum, to abandon ship. All right, last one in this segment before we bring on Jeff. So the budget issue, Dr. Robbins came out and reported that there's a $240 million shortfall for Arizona's budget, and that may affect the athletic department. From what I've heard, this is just kind of a ploy to get donors to pony up in the athletic department, which wouldn't shock me. As far as the rest of the university, I mean, unfortunately, that's not what this program deals with. So I can't speak to it. How much does this situation concern you from what you know about it?
Well, I don't know any more than you do.
From an athletic department
but in terms of the athletic, not really. It doesn't concern me much. I mean, especially considering that so much money is generated from boosters, from outside sources. I think, and it seems like that, Dave Hickey and Dr. Robbins have a good relationship with the boosters, and they're willing to pony up as long as teams are doing well. Football and men's basketball specifically. So I don't think so. I mean, I guess, there's the potential of, and I would hate to see them eliminate certain programs from this, which I think would be more likely than anything else. They have more programs than the average Big 12 school does. So there would be that, that like the so-called non-revenue sports, which would be unfortunate. But as far as football and men's basketball, I don't think it's going to impact that situation in any way. I mean, if Jedd Fisch is, in line to get a $5 million per year contract extension, then I think that tells you all you need to know. And Tommy Lloyd was asked about it yesterday, and he said, the question was, are you concerned about the budget issue? And he said, I hope, is it going to be an issue? He said, I hope not. I didn't come here for no budget. And then he said, he asked, what have you heard about it? And Tommy Lloyd said, nothing. I'm going to tell you. So take that for what it's worth. But I don't, long story short, I don't think it's going to impact the two main programs we're talking about much, if at all.
Okay. Yeah, I would think so too. I just don't see it, maybe some of the smaller sports, but I would not at this point be concerned from what I know of it, which is little, that there would be sports that would be cut. I ignore selling the athletic department to an outside source. I think that's a bunch of garbage. So that we'll talk about in the future. As of right now, I don't believe Jedd Fisch is leaving, and I don't believe the athletic department will be as affected as some people think with this budget shortfall. Time will tell. But right now, let's just all enjoy the ride because it's a lot of fun. And we have a big game this weekend against Utah, and we have our guy, Jeff Dean, to break it down here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, everyone? It's Chris Krakowski, and football season is back. Ice Shaker is a proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. Don't forget to check out some of our new products like the Ice Shaker with the built-in bump box speaker that's going to absolutely pop at your next tailgate party. Let's crush it this season. Bear down.
Well, it's always good, Shane, to have the voice of McHale Center in Arizona Stadium, our old pal Jeff Dean, who started this program with you back in, 2017 maybe? 2018, something like that?
Last time Arizona got to a bowl game, yeah.
That's right. We've gone all these years and haven't talked about a bowl game until now. Jeff, as always, thanks for joining us for almost the 20th time, right up there. I don't have the exact number, but it's pretty close. I mean, of all the times we've had you on, I mean, as low as it's gotten, ASU in 2020, this has to be as high. Arizona fans, especially you, such a diehard, riding that high. Just explain your thoughts. I mean, which program is more exciting to you at this point? If you had to pick one, football or basketball?
I mean, that's like asking you to pick your favorite child, I guess, right? I mean, it's, how do you pick just one over the other? I mean, Arizona basketball on one hand is a well-oiled machine, and it has been for quite some time, practically as long as I've been alive, it's been a well-oiled machine. They're obviously coming off a really tremendously exciting victory on the road against Duke last week, and everybody's riding high on that. And we've got some big opponents coming up starting this Friday with Belmont coming to Tucson. I mean, that's a really good basketball program and they got a really good team this year. And then obviously, with Michigan State and FAU coming up, FAU looks really, really good right now. So this is certainly an exciting time to be an Arizona Wildcat basketball fan. But for football fans, this has got to be just a really special time because, even though we have been, it almost seems like people forget that we were in the Fiesta Bowl less than 10 years ago. And there's a lot of schools that wish they could be in a New Year's Six bowl game every 10 years. And I think Arizona fans have forgotten that, but I think it's because the lows were so stinking low for several years. We had, one exiting coach basically admit that he'd stopped doing his job and stopped recruiting. And then the next coach that came in and never started doing his job. And now here we are with a guy who made a lot of promises and has delivering on those promises in Jedd Fisch. And this team just continues to impress. And I think that's the most exciting thing right now. They're finding ways to win football games as opposed to how we're used to viewing Arizona football as finding new and inventive ways to lose football games. Mm-hmm. So super, super exciting now for both, but certainly new territory for football fans.
Well, let's go chronological order and talk about basketball. You were at McHale to call two of those games, and of course the Duke game in Cameron Indoor. Your impressions so far? I mean, obviously there's so many good things to say, but anything in particular that stood out to you, either from a team perspective or from an individual player perspective?
First of all, from the team perspective, number one, we all kind of knew this team was going to be deep. I'm really impressed with the development of some of last year's freshmen that are now playing as sophomores this year, and guys who aren't in the starting rotation, guys like Philip Borovichinen, and that are coming off the bench and really have developed quite well in their role. And you feel more confident when those guys start to come into the game, as we saw in the game against Southern the other night, because the backups played for the entire the majority of the second half in that game, and that was great to see. And they even extended the lead in that game against the other team starters. But really, from a team standpoint, the defense, I think, is actually really quite good. When they need to get stops, they seem to be able to do so. They create a lot of turnovers. They're extremely long. They're very difficult to shoot against. John Shire and his players would tell you the same thing. And I think, defensively, this team is going to be better than other Tommy Lloyd teams that we've seen in the previous couple of years. As far as an individual player goes, I mean, I tweeted it out during the game yesterday during halftime when I had a few minutes just to tweet. Keyshawn Johnson is he is everything that I love to see in a basketball player. He's tenacious on both ends of the glass. He offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds. He crashes the glass hard. He finds his way to sneak in and around, even though it's 6'7". But once you get in there amongst Ballo and Krivos and then the other team's centers and things like that, I mean, he kind of gets dwarfed in there as even at 6'7". But he's just explosive off the floor. He's got a nice shooting stroke from the outside. He loves that corner three. He makes his free throws, and he can defend any position on the floor. and he does so with a lot of intensity and a lot of fervor. And I just love the way he plays the game. He's got good handles. He can run the break if he needs to. He's everything you want in a basketball player, and a super nice kid as well. I've had a chance to talk to him a couple of times at McHale. Super nice kid, always energetic, always happy, having a great time. He's having a great time here at Arizona, and it shows. And I just, man, I tell you what, in the games, you look down at one end of the floor where the play just happened, and the next thing you know, 3 seconds later, he's under the basket getting a loose ball, and I'm like, how did he get down there so fast? He embodies everything I love to see in a basketball player, and I love me some Keyshawn Johnson.
And he and Caleb Love know how to get to the Final Four, which could be a big deal.
Yes, they do.
Let me ask you about Arizona's rotation. You touched upon the depth that this year's team has, and then we saw at Duke, Tommy Lloyd shortened it up to 8 guys. The 5 starters, and then KJ Lewis, Krivas, and Bradley off the bench. Do you see that, especially when Arizona faces tougher competition, maybe being more the norm, or do you see maybe Borovichinen or Morauskas finding minutes as well?
I don't know if Philip Borovichinen or Paulius Morauskas are going to get a lot of PT against the marquee teams. But I think once Henry Vesar comes back, I think you'll start seeing him get worked into the rotation a little bit because they love his skill set, his length, and maybe depending on what his development looks like and, in comparison to what they see in practice, maybe he starts getting some of Krivas's minutes. But I do think there's going to be a heavy rotation of bigs. So I do think it's going to be important to get Henry Vesar back, hopefully sometime in December.
All right, let's keep it on the basketball train. As far as this win, Jeff, and I said this in the first segment, I don't think there will be 5 better wins by any team that all season in college basketball than what Arizona accomplished on Friday night. Would you agree with that? And then, secondly, where would you put this win just in your memory bank as far as important non-conference Arizona wins? Where would you rank that in the last decade or two?
Oh boy. Well, the first aspect with being one of the 5 best wins any team will get in the country this year, that all depends on how Duke finishes their season, obviously. If Duke bounces back, I think last I checked, they were up by 10 on Michigan State right now as we're recording this. Yep. So they seem to be well in control of that game as it stands right now. But if they falter, they finish 7th in the ACC this year. All of a sudden, we're kind of saying, oh, maybe Arizona beat a team that was too high on themselves early in the season. They really kind of settled into the team they really were, or whatever. Or Duke could end up going 30-1 the rest of the season, and we can say, gosh, we were the only team to get them, and we got them on their court in one of the toughest places to play in America, which would then make it the greatest win in college basketball this year, outside of the team that gets to cut down the nets, whoever that may be, come April. As far as non-conference wins, I was talking with Ryan Hansen about this last night before the game, and we were talking about the last time Arizona played Duke. We were talking about, obviously, the 12-15-12 game, the Florida game back in McHale, and what an amazing game that was. I remember the 2 Gonzaga games that we've had at McHale when Sean was there, and the overtime game and TJ slapping the floor and the opposing, the Gonzaga point guard kind of scoffing at him, and then TJ getting the steal and the layup to kind of seal the game. I mean, those are just, there's almost too many to mention, because Arizona has competed at the highest level against the highest teams when they've been willing to schedule us. So last week's win was really special, I think, for a lot of reasons, though, because it wasn't played on a neutral court.
I think that's it. You're at
home and home.
Yeah, right. You're at Duke and you win that game. Whereas when's the last time Arizona had a non-conference true road win of that magnitude? Off the top of my head, I mean, maybe if you're listening, you come up with something, let me know. I certainly can't think of one that ranks in that same ballpark. Would you?
Where was San Diego State ranked when we beat them in San Diego? Was it like 4 years ago, 5 years ago? I want to say, were they the number 12 team in the country?
I think they were up there, but it wasn't anywhere.
Certainly not on this level.
No.
Yeah, certainly not on this level. And look, no slouch to San Diego State. That's a great place to play as well. Their fans show up for their games, and they're obviously a wonderful program as well, but it's not Duke. It's not Cameron.
Let's switch to football now. I mean, 7-3, even you, the eternal optimist, you couldn't have predicted 7-3. Now let's talk about this weekend's game against Utah. The Utes have an excellent defense. Offense is a work in progress that they generated 28 points at Washington last week. What do you think are the key factors for an Arizona win? I know in our last segment, you won't be able to make a pick with us, What do you give us a few key factors that you're going to be looking for on Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's been the same thing for several games in a row now, and not we'll exclude the Colorado game because I had different keys to that because of their strengths and their weaknesses. But when you look at Oregon State, UCLA, and Utah, three very similar teams, and the fact that they bring a very I guess mature and very large set of players in the trenches, both on the offensive and defensive side, and very adept at what they do. We know about Utah and the kind of guys that they recruit over there that Kyle gets. He loves to beef up those defensive lines, and his offensive lines are usually very, very cohesive. So obviously line play, just like it was against Oregon State and just like it was against UCLA, is going to be paramount for the Wildcats this weekend if they want to get a win. It's nice to have Raymond Polito back. Nice to have him back in the starting rotation now. Jedd said that he's going to play the rest of the season because he's healthy, and they want him out there to play. I think playing him in the Colorado game caused some cohesive problems. I mean, anytime you inject a new player under the offensive line and have him play 64 snaps, it's going to happen. Hopefully that gets cleaned up this week, and Arizona can be a little tighter in their pass protections and things like that against a much more capable team in Utah in the trenches. And I think Arizona's going to have to get some explosive plays. This is something that Arizona has been kind of tiptoeing on, but we haven't seen the big 70-yard touchdown runs and 65-yard touchdown bombs and things like that a lot of other teams are getting. Arizona tends to get like the 22-yard runs and stuff, which are great. I mean, don't get me wrong; there's nothing wrong with those. But I think Arizona's ability to hit the home run ball has been a little bit less this year than some of the other more explosive offenses. But that's okay, because as you're seeing, Arizona is still winning football games in a different way. And I'll take the win any way I can, to be honest with you. And this team has learned how to win. We have a coach who actually knows how to work the clock when it comes down to fourth quarter crunch time and trying to seal the victory for the team. And those are all important things as well. And I think the most important thing and the most impressive thing I've seen out of this team this year is that they've worn teams down in the fourth quarter. Yeah. They've worn bigger, what traditionally would have been bigger, more adept, more mature teams. They've worn them down in the fourth quarter. Oregon State was blowing snot bubbles on the field against Arizona in that fourth quarter. We were pushing them all over the place, and UCLA didn't have a chance against us in the fourth quarter. So it'll be interesting to see what happens against Utah.
Appreciate that visual, Jeff. Let me talk about the defensive side of the ball. Light years better than last year, goes without saying. Johnny Nanson's done a great job. Dwayne Akeen has probably had a hand in the aggressiveness. My only concern on that side of the ball is the lack of takeaways. They haven't had any in the last 3 games, and they've won in spite of that, which is great. They've taken care of the ball on offense. What are your thoughts on that? Is that just more like a luck thing because Colorado had a fumble on a punt return that bounced right into another player's hands, or is it a bigger issue than that?
Turnovers are one of those strange things in football, right? You have a team like, I always remember the New Orleans Saints, the year that they won the Super Bowl in the NFL, and they set the NFL record that year for most takeaways, and nobody had that team really too much of a threat to win the Super Bowl that year, but that team just mowed people down because they were getting 3.5 turnovers a game that season. And it just seemed like the ball bounced their direction every single time it hit the turf. And sometimes for teams, it just goes the opposite way. Sometimes, the ball just doesn't bounce your way. And I think it's partly luck, and you hate to say luck when it comes down to football things because you really don't want to believe in that kind of stuff. But I think partly it does have to do with some luck, but it obviously has to do with things like positioning and awareness and just overall experience in turning teams over and getting into that type of mindset, as opposed to let's just instead of securing the tackle, hey, let's kind of go for it. Let's start punching at the ball a little bit, or let's get ourselves into a situation where we can start baiting quarterbacks and get them into throws that they don't want to be making. And I think that will eventually come along. I mean, obviously Arizona is playing very good defense, and I feel like in the last couple of games I've said in certain times against Oregon State and then against Colorado last week, I said to myself, it's going to take a turnover, I think, to kind of change the course of this game. And neither times Arizona was able to get a turnover, but what they were able to get is a crucial 3 and out, and then get really good field position going back the other way, and then able to secure the win. So that's great. That's great and everything, but there's nothing wrong with a pick six every now and then to kind of spur the crowd and kind of just get that cheap 6 points on the board when the other team wasn't expecting it.
And hopefully those are still on their way. We talked a little bit about it before we started recording, Jeff, but obviously with Jedd Fisch having the success he's had, his name's going to be linked to every single head coaching vacancy out there. I don't think he's leaving, at least not this year. Tell us why you think he's going to stick around.
I just don't think Jedd doesn't strike me as the guy to just pack up his stuff and leave, like that. I mean, not for his own, glorification, I guess, if you will. People had mentioned when Jedd was hired, they're like, well, the guy hasn't stayed anywhere more than 2 years. And it's like, okay, when you look at his resume and the coaches that he was learning under throughout those years, I mean, we understand this now because we look back and say, oh gosh, he went to go work for Sean McVay, he went to go work for Bill Belichick, he went to go work for Jim Harbaugh, and it's like, you start to see all of these things kind of adding up and you're like, okay, well, he was working his way up, getting to learn from all of these different great coaches that are in the country, whether it be NFL or at the collegiate level, and was just waiting to get the right interview with the right job. And thankfully, Arizona gave him that shot. And I still stand on my reasoning as to why I thought this was a great hire to begin with, is because you had a guy that went through all of that stuff, leaving Post-it notes on Steve Spurrier's windshield and stuff like that for 435 consecutive days, and Arizona gave him his shot. And I think that there's a lot of loyalty there. I also think that with Arizona moving to the Big 12 and being in the state of Texas every year now, they're going to be traveling to the state of Texas, maybe even twice. His wife is from Texas. I think that's, kind of an important thing as well. She's going to get to go home a couple of times a year and spend some time there. So I think it's just all kind of aligning for him to stay at Arizona for a little while longer.
Yeah. And look at the Big 12 next year. It seems like it's ripe for the taking. So I think that's another thing to consider. I got one more question for you. Since we're not going to talk to you probably before the ASU game, we asked Brian Jeffries about this last week, so I'll ask you. Obviously, Arizona is better than ASU this year. That's no two ways about that. I don't think the talent gap is quite as big as it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. The other way around, ASU's at home. Arizona hasn't beaten ASU in Tempe since 2011, and you got the rivalry game factor. I'm sure you would pick Arizona to win that game if you're allowed to pick it, but just maybe a couple of keys to that game, and like maybe what, if anything, would concern you about ASU.
Yeah, I mean, for Arizona, it's all hands on deck. So every man on the defensive side of the ball needs to be ready for the ball to come their way. I mean, because you just don't know what ASU is going to do. I mean, they ran 18 different formations in the game this past weekend.
3 different quarterbacks, essentially, too.
Exactly, 3 different quarterbacks. Scattaboo threw the ball as well as any quarterback. This weekend and on that touchdown pass, they are just. This is what they've had to resort to. I mean, because of injuries and because of personnel and because of talent and all these other things, this is what they've had to resort to. Arizona just needs to make sure that they're sound on defense and then just put the foot down on offensively, because they know that they're better than that football team. We know that they're better than their football team. That football team knows that we're better than they are. You just have to show it to them. You have to prove it to them and not get over your skis, I guess, too much, if you will. And, maybe throw in a few wrinkles yourself. Maybe give them a taste of their own medicine. Put Connor. Put Connor McLaughlin in the Wildcat offense or something. Do something fun with it. Just have a good time and come out with a dub. You
know what we haven't talked about, Eric? And I'm sorry, I know I just said one more question, but I was just thinking about this. When they played UCLA a couple of weeks ago, Arizona played UCLA. They had Jaden DeLora on the field for that one play. And he threw it back to DeLora, and they actually had that set up really well to Wildcat.
Really well, yep.
6 blockers in front of him. He probably would have scored a touchdown. Yeah. But DeLora short-armed it. So I'm wondering that, does Jedd have a few wrinkles maybe he's going to throw into the ASU game, even if he might not have to? It makes me wonder if that's something that he's going to throw in. Maybe try to find a way to get DeLora on the field. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Jedd likes to have fun. He wants his players to have fun. I mean, he still loves the game of football. He's not, a hardened, Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban type. He likes to have fun out there, and I think that's why he does things like that, and why he allows to have, Jaden go out there and take the final snap in the victory formation up in Washington State and things like that. He thinks of his players first.
All right, Jeff, a question I have never asked you in all of the years that I have known you. You have a picture of the Alamo behind you. Is that an indication of where you think Arizona will end up in the bowl game? And if not, what are you thinking?
I mean, it's nice looking out here right now, right, guys? I mean, it's
beautiful.
The weather is nice out here. It's nice and quiet in San Antonio, and the Alamo is a beautiful place and a beautiful setting for a football game. And And gosh, what an interesting matchup that would be if Arizona could play Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl coming up this December 28th, which would be a great matchup, and I think a matchup we would all kind of be licking our chops to see. And let's gauge ourselves against a team that's going to be going to the SEC and vacating our new conference, and we can do it on a big stage, because that's one of the only games. That's one of the marquee games on December 28th. It's one of the two big games played that day. So I think I have a feeling that's where we're going. That's just my prediction.
To get there, Arizona needs to win its next two games. We'll make some predictions as to what's going to happen this weekend. Will Shane be more optimistic? Find out next here in Wildcat Country. All right, time for our final segment, and it's time for picks. So I went 7-2 last week, and I'm 59, 41-2, pretty darn good on the season. Shane 6-3, and there's only 2 games behind me with 57 wins. Our guest last week, my buddy Alan Bell, 3-6 again. Ouch. They are 50-50-2. Can Jeff Dean get them over the hump with 7 games, including 6 with Pac-12 ties? We'll give him a pass on the Arizona game, but let's start with Georgia at Tennessee. Big game on CBS this weekend. The Bulldogs are favored by 10.5. Jeff, I'll start with you. Who you got?
Well, I don't remember how I did the last time we did this. I don't feel like I did very well, so I apologize in advance.
You were 5-5. You were 5-5 last time.
Okay, well, I was right in kissing.
That's better than 3-6, right?
It is better than 3-6. I guess I'll take it. But yeah, listen, I've been to a Georgia-Tennessee game. I went to the Georgia-Tennessee game in 2003, I believe it was, in Athens, Georgia. It's a very interesting rivalry. Those two fan bases absolutely cannot stand one another. I think it's one of the longest continuing rivalries in the country as far as how many years consecutive they've played one another and things like that. So should get pretty interesting down there in Knoxville, and being kind of a quasi Tennessee fan because of certain people that I've had in my life over the years, and friends and family and stuff like that. I've been to a couple of games down there, but they don't seem to have the complete package this year. They seem to get kind of beat up in the trenches a little bit, and if they don't get out to an early lead, like a 14-0 lead, they usually just have real trouble getting back into games. So I'll take the Bulldogs minus 10.5 on the road.
Shane.
Yeah, your buddy Alan Bell tried to warn us against picking his Vols, and we didn't listen. We didn't listen. Nope. So I won't make that mistake again. I think Georgia's run is going to end soon, but not this weekend. I think they find a way to win, and I think they find a way to cover against a Tennessee team that's going in the opposite direction.
Just have a hunch this game's going to be close. Maybe Tennessee got caught looking ahead to this weekend against Georgia. I think this is a one-possession game. I'm going to disagree with both of you. Take Tennessee with the points. All right, let's get into the Pac-12 Friday night. Colorado at Washington State, 2 teams that have not fared well against Arizona this year, and the Cougars, who have lost, 5 in a row, 6 in a row, something like that, favored by 4.5. Shane, where are you going with this one?
You remember when that win looked really impressive?
Not anymore.
In Pullman. Yeah, not anymore. And if there's one team that's been fading faster than Colorado, it's Washington State. And Colorado hasn't been playing that badly. They're not good, but they haven't been as bad as their record shows. Washington State has been playing even worse than their record shows. I don't think the location matters that much. I think Colorado finds a way to win, and then at least you have the subplot of can Deion Sanders get Colorado to a bowl game going into their final game against Utah. So I'm going to take Colorado.
All right. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, this is a strange one for me. To see Wazoo favored by 4.5, I get it. They're at home, and Colorado has not been playing, all that great lately. They've been losing a lot of games, but they've also been playing some pretty darn good football teams during that losing streak, as opposed to Wazoo, who has lost to some pretty bad football teams during that time, and a couple of them pretty handily. Like Shane said, Colorado's been playing pretty well. I got a really good look at Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and, that team that they've got. And I felt like they played really, really hard against Arizona on Saturday. And I just think that the wrong team is favored in the Friday night pillow fight. Give me Colorado straight up.
Colorado straight up. Boy, I got to think Washington State, their last Pac-12 home game, I got to think they bounce back at some point. I just want to continue to fade Colorado because they have proven to be an absolute fraud in the second half of the year. I guess Washington State hasn't been much better. I think Cam Ward, his final collegiate home game, will take care of business and win by a touchdown there. We'll see how I do with this one. Another one that is kind of a weird one, California in the what is it? The big game, -6.5 at Stanford. I actually like Stanford in this one. I think they're going to keep it within a field goal. Call me crazy. Jeff, would you agree with that? Or are you taking Cal with the points?
Man, this is such a confusing game to me. Again, it's a rivalry game, which you throw all that stuff out the window and things like that. And two teams that are separated by not too far of a distance, and certainly familiar with one another. Two teams that have been kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of the Pac-12 so far this year. But I'm going to lean towards Stanford here. I think. Again, I don't want to say wrong team favorite, but I think this is gonna be a really close football game. So give me the Cardinal plus, what did you say, 6.5?
6.5. Yep.
Oh man,
I like that.
I'll take Cardinal plus 6.5 all day.
How about you, Shane?
Yeah, the ACC game of the week, huh? Yeah, I think Cal's a little bit better than we give him credit for. And Stanford, I mean, despite we have in mind that they're the big comeback win at Colorado, which is a little bit, I don't say fluky, but I think Cal is just a little bit better team. I don't think that home field matters that much. And number one, because they're close together, and number two, because neither fan base cares that much about football. So I'm gonna take Cal. I'm gonna take Cal with the points.
Boy, you and I disagree on the first three picks. Let's see about this one. UCLA, who I'm not sure who's healthy in their quarterback room, and their coach, Chip Kelly, might be coaching one of his final games at the university at USC, who's favored by 6.5. Jeff, I'll start with you on this one. Boy, what are you picking this garbage matchup?
Garbage is right. I mean, look at how far USC has fallen off, how bad they play on defense. They can't tackle anybody. However, they probably won't have to tackle anybody, because I don't know if anybody's going to be able to complete a pass for UCLA in that game. They're just really bad. I mean, their offense is the worst I've seen at UCLA in a long, long time. And I can't believe that Chip Kelly is their head coach. Thankfully for UCLA fans, it won't be for long. I like the Trojans big on Saturday.
I agree. Caleb Williams, last game. I am going to take likely last game of his college career. I'm going to take them by a couple of touchdowns at least. How about you, Shane?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think, I know we're all horribly biased, but I think that game, the ASU beating UCLA, was so much more about Chip Kelly's play calling and lack of good coaching. I mean, they left so many points on the board, and it was uninspired and ridiculous. And, credit to ASU for finding the way to win, but UCLA is headed in the wrong direction, even more so than USC. I like USC to win, and maybe not by, 20 some odd points, but enough to cover.
I have a pick in this next game, and it's a huge one. Washington at Oregon State, that I absolutely love. Now, for Arizona fans, you need Washington to keep their undefeated season alive, because that would potentially keep Arizona to the Pac-12 championship game alive. I believe Arizona needs Washington to win this game, Oregon State to beat Oregon next week, and just to win out, and they would be facing the Huskies in a rematch in Vegas in 2 weeks. Will that happen? Shane, I'm going to start with you. Oregon State is -2 at home against Washington. What do you think?
Boy, it's tough to win in Corvallis this time of year, but Washington's used to playing in those conditions. You just feel Washington's due for a loss at some point. They keep finding ways to win, but that's what good teams do. And I don't, the spread is kind of negligible. I think this is going to be a great game. I think the Huskies live to stay undefeated for yet another week, and they win by a field goal.
Okay. By the way, the last two matchups have been decided on game-winning field goals at the buzzer. Just want to point that out, or the final whistle. Jeff, how about you?
This is a great game. It's going to be a good one. Washington, really, really good football team. I've got a chance to see both of these teams up close, as have you guys. Mm-hmm. You saw both these teams play. There's just something that tells me that the Pac-12 is going to ruin itself once again, like it always does. It always seems to cannibalize itself and keep itself out of the limelight for as best as it can, even in its best year in 2 decades as far as football goes. I think Oregon State wins this game, and I think Oregon State wins this game by covering that 2-point spread.
All right, I'm going to give you just a couple of quick stats. Oregon State, in their last 17 games at home, they are 16-1 straight up, and they are 16-1 against the spread. They are 12-0 against the spread in their last 12 Pac-12 games at Reser Stadium. Need I say more? Oregon State 30, Washington 24. Arizona not going to the Pac-12 championship game. Sorry, I guess. Okay, let's talk about Oregon. Speaking of a team that likely will end up in the Pac-12 championship game, favored by 23.5 at ASU. Shane, I know you were always strong with picking the Sun Devils. Big win for them last week. What do you think this week?
And like I said, my strategy is always, look, if ASU covers, at least I get it right. So that's mostly my motivation. But I will credit Kenny Dillingham for not having that team give up on him. They're still playing hard for, lack of talent and everything. It's kind of like Jedd Fisch with Arizona 2 years ago. Just the talent isn't there. But ASU found a way to win at UCLA. I think they're going to play inspired against Oregon. It's not going to be enough to win. It might be enough to cover. I could see ASU losing this game by 20 or so points. So I'm going to lean ASU to cover, even though I don't feel good about it. I never feel good picking ASU against the spread, but here I am.
All right, Jeff, how about you?
Well, I'm kind of with Shane on this one. I just feel like, it's a big number, 23.5, obviously, to go on the road and post that type of a win. I just kind of feel like there's a backdoor cover in here somewhere. Oregon's up 34-14 with 1:10 to go. ASU gets loose. They don't stop playing. They score a touchdown, end up losing the game by 21 points or something like that. I just kind of feel like that's kind of the direction where this one is going.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take ASU plus 23.5 at home.
I'm going Oregon. Style points matter for the Ducks. They need to be impressive throughout just to leave no doubt in people's minds as to if they belong in the Final Four. And finally, all right, it's a game that Jeff cannot pick since he's calling the game at Arizona Stadium. Maybe I asked you in the last segment for a key. Maybe just give us something else, something to keep an eye on for Saturday's matchup.
I'm going to give you 3 words. Speedy Luke touchdown.
Okay. Interesting.
Like it.
Just going to put it out there.
Which would double his touchdowns for the season, I believe.
That's right. Speedy's going to score. I talked about explosive plays. He's the guy we need to get one out of.
Okay. High scoring, low scoring game.
I think it's surprisingly going to be a pretty, I think a more high scoring game than we're expecting it to be. 3 weeks ago, Utah couldn't find the end zone. Now all of a sudden they're scoring points like it's like they're going out of style. So I think it could be like a 31-28, 32-29 kind of game. I think the scores could be up there.
Okay, I'm going to go first. I'm going to let Shane make the pick. He's going to be at the game, as will I, on Saturday. So I'm going to give him the last pick. So Utah has never won 2 road games against ranked teams in a season ever. They are 1-3 this season when allowing 21 or more points, and 7-0 when they allow fewer than 21. Arizona also is the best team in the country against the spread. They're 8-2, and they are 5-0 against ranked teams. All of that to me points to an Arizona win. Am I unsure about it? Yeah, I don't feel as confident as I did against Oregon State or UCLA, but give me Wildcats 23, Utes 17. Shane? Go ahead. You have the floor.
I am going to go in the opposite direction, not so much because I don't believe in Arizona, but because I think Utah is playing very well right now. They push Washington to its limit. They destroyed ASU, which they should have, but it was still a very impressive all-around performance. They finally starting to click offensively. Defensively, they're very tough. I think Arizona, they're finding ways to win close games, which is what good teams do. I think they're probably due to lose one of these down the stretch. And again, it's more about Utah being very good than Arizona not playing well. But I'm going to take Utah by a touchdown, 27-20. And I will say the only positive about that is if that does happen, Arizona's going to go into Tempe angry and ready to show that they belong in the top 25 and they're the best team in the state. So if they lose, keep that in mind. I hope we all witness a win in person, but I'm going to take Utah by a touchdown.
Now, you're not a hater. You just pick them like you see them, and I admire that. I mean, we're not here to pick Arizona in every single game. Now, I am 9-1 picking Wildcat games against the spread, as you did point out.
And people should remember that. If you're mad at me, just remember, Eric is 9-1 picking Arizona against the spread this year. So take heart in that and don't listen to anything I say.
The only one I got wrong was Washington State. I did not see that one coming, Jeff. Sorry, 44-6. Thought the Cougars would roll.
Hey, I don't think anybody saw that final score coming. I think a lot of people were predicting maybe a win, but I don't think many people saw that score coming. But I will say this for Shane, in his defense, I think that Shane thinks more about how Arizona's mindset is going to be going into the Arizona State game, whether it is week 1 or week 10.
I do.
So I think that is why he just does not want Arizona to be on a win streak going into Tempe. That's where his
get out of my head.
That's where his mind is at. I know how this man works.
Yeah, there's a little truth to that.
Already thinking about ideas for his third Arizona ASU book that's coming out in 2028.
There is not going to be a trilogy.
Just wait. All right. For our buddy Jeff Dean, thank you as always for joining us. Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. Another big one this week. Bear down.